Thanks so much for joining us today on More Than Good Food, the podcast, where our goal is to have honest conversations about what it means to live a healthy life. I'm your host, Brooke Gordon, and today we're talking about routines, both the value of it, but also the pitfalls. Now, I am joined by parenting coach Meaghan Jackson, and if you've listened to any of our previous episodes in this season, then you know she owns multiple businesses. She homeschools 3 very active boys who also happen to be my nephews. Meaghan, so glad you're here today.
Hi.
So I find, that first, let's say 2 hours of the morning, it's the time when it really sets the tone for me on how my day is going to go. I think about, I want to be focused. I want to be productive for the day. In fact, I saw a great meme this morning. It was a snapshot from Friends, and the caption was, "Are you Monica or are you Rachel?" Right? And one's got her baseball cap on and she's making a smoothie, and the other one's like coveting her coffee with a glare in a robe. And I think that really kind of ties into what does the morning look like, feel like. And with that, I think of the 5 M's for me that immediately come to mind. We've got, you might have medical needs. Some people do in the mornings. Your metabolism is sort of waking up. You may or may not have a meal. You, I hope, are getting some movement, but that's not for everybody. But really, mindset is a huge part of the morning. So Meaghan, I'm going to start off with a question for you. Do you have a routine, or is it more an aspiration?
Personally, I do have a routine in the morning. It changes over the years. I mean, when I had little kids, my routine was just being woken up by a scream. So whoever's awake. Now that they're getting older, I actually have time in the morning to myself. So I like to have a more of a routine.
Nice. I have I guess the luxury of waking up, and one of the things for me is, that first hug in the morning. That's my favorite part of my whole day. We refer to it in our household as snuggles, and it's just that time to just be present with each other. Usually I still half asleep, and so that sets the tone of my whole day. And it starts off with a moment of joy. And then I usually head off to go and find some water, balance the fluids, if you get what I mean, and run to the washroom. And then I try to start getting in some movement. But for me, that first, even after all of that, that first cup of tea, I hear my clients talking about that first cup of coffee. That is like the quintessential signature morning ritual. I'm going to use the word ritual on purpose. You measure the water, and you may have fresh grinds, or you may sort of open up a package and smell. You're measuring out whether it's tea or coffee. You have to wait for it to brew. That first long inhale before you take your first sip, because it's still scalding, that sensation of the warm liquid coming in, you're feeling it in your mouth, you're feeling swallowing it, sort of breathing in all of that time. That's almost a meditation right there of, going through the steps and having just focus, presence in the moment of the thing. What is coffee or tea? Does that play a role in your mornings?
Not at all. I am not a hot drink person. And my husband works crazy hours, so he's the only coffee drinker. And he's now turned to those little pods. So it's a little faster for him when he needs to get going. My morning does start a lot with mindset for me. I wake up, and because of my faith, I wake up and I think, put God first. And that's the first thing I always say I turn off, like I'm tempted to go check my phone, really tempted. I know that's something that you remind us not to do. And I don't. I was like, no, I got to start first with what's really going to help me feel connected and grounded and set my tone for the day. So I reach for whatever devotional or reading that I'm doing, and I start my morning with that. And that helps me just shift my mind to where I want it to start for my day. And then I make sure I try to also find some, I'm not as into the movement, but it's more of a grounding type thing. I like to be outside in bare feet if I can, just greet the day, check on my vegetables, just wake up and enjoy the morning as often as I can, depending on the weather. And then I try to feel organized. It really just helps me if I wake up and I know what the plan is for the day. So I make sure our homeschool things are written on the board. So when the kids wake up, they're not asking me 20 times, what are we doing today? I'm like, check the board. I've already written it all down. And then I can see, okay, do we have something on the go today? What do I need to prep? It's just like, doesn't take me too long, but just so I feel like I have a sense. And then I kind of just jump right into work because I can squeeze in a bit of time before they wake up. So my morning routine is a little shorter, and then it's sort of check my messages and squeeze in some work before they wake up. Oh, and I eat.
Hey, oh, wow.
I have to make sure I eat because I get hangry. So yeah.
All right, we're going to unpack all of that.
Oh yeah.
And I love that I haven't yet heard that you actually drink anything. Do you do anything to drink in the morning? Is hydration?
I do. I have water when I first wake up.
Nice. That's also what I do. Like a nice big, you usually see me with like big glass of water. That's huge for me.
See, everyone knows the teacups. We own teacups, but they know that that's sort of mommy's cup and it's always got water in it. So
nice. Oh, I love that. And I think that's one of the things that I find so helpful in the morning is, for your body's massively dehydrated, right? You've gone like, whether it's 6-8 hours without any liquids. If you snore, it's worse, right? Because it's just your mouth breather or that dryness of the air. And we've had a conversation before about hydration, how much it helps restore your focus, can prevent headaches, right? That whole sense of feeling foggy, that can all come with hydration. But I also love that you sit outside. And I'll say my morning varies quite a bit. So my weekday and my weekend are two completely different routines. But weekdays, I get up, I have some water, and I'm outside, unless it's pouring rain. But for the most part, I'm outside and I'm moving. And for me, part of it is just, I want to see the sun. I want to, I know that I'm getting some vitamin D. So for me, there's some exposure, right? Like I don't put on sunscreen in my morning walk. I'll listen to the birds. I want to hear the wind. I'm sort of listening to the neighborhood wake up. And that's a part of it. And sometimes my spouse will come with me. Sometimes I go by myself. When I go by myself, I'm just, I'm not always with my thoughts. I intentionally don't take music. I just don't want to hear what's around me. And I want to, as you said, not necessarily plan out my day, but just let whatever thoughts are there start to come to fruition, start to put themselves together. And I find, I heard you say that waking up that little bit earlier, that's something that a lot of my clients do, especially with kids, just getting up that little bit earlier than everyone else in the house. And it's two things. It's just the quiet. It's a sense of productivity, but really it's those few minutes before someone comes and says, I need you. It's just, there's no accountability in those few minutes.
Yeah, having been jarred out of sleep by mom, I'm up, or mom, where's breakfast? Like it's a jolt. It's like you're being ripped awake and then you're just suddenly thrown into the day. So, but not everyone's in that situation. But when I can, and if you can, it helps even just to be awake before them, just helps you feel more confident.
And I find I change it up. Like there's been mornings when I get up, I do turn on my device, and next thing you know, 2 hours is gone. Like gone in an instant. I'm like, how the heck did that happen? Well, there goes all of, my plans. And so I, and there's a balance, because maybe you need your phone for an alarm. The one thing that I have really enjoyed personally about working from home is I get up naturally well before I'm needed to log in. And so I haven't had to set an alarm. I've been waking up naturally. Whereas before, if I was taking the train, it was still dark when I was getting up, right? And I definitely needed two alarms just in case. Because, one to make sure that I got up, and then one to remind me that I need to leave the house right now. What about you? How have you found, in terms of, like, you talked about the mom, I'm awake, but what do you wake up naturally? Do you rely on a phone and then that's a trigger for you? What's
No,
your
I have woken up. I guess my body is just used to routine. It naturally wakes up around the same time, no matter when I go to bed, but it's always been the same time, like probably since like high school. Unless I sleep in, and usually I sort of am half awake, stirring in bed, and then I choose to roll over. But generally, I wake up at the same time. It's more that um, I try to remind myself when I do go on my phone in the mornings, I have to make this conscious effort to only check for notifications and not scroll. Like, I just check the little bell. If I got any notifications, quickly scan through that and then just turn it off, because you get sucked in to a lot. So it's a lot about being intentional.
Yeah, so I've experimented a lot with this, and I find my days feel better when I'm not connected to my device before, let's say, 8:30, 9 o'clock. I find it's super productive and quiet. There's no email coming in yet. Like, I can get a ton done, but at the same time, it's actually impacted me in a way that I wasn't expecting, and I don't think I enjoy. That sense of time just gone. I might see something that could be a trigger, or now my brain instead is thinking about how am I going to respond, right?
Yeah.
I haven't even finished having my water. I certainly haven't had any any lovely warm beverage. In my case, I don't drink coffee, but some herbal tea or anything that just that comforting feeling, and already I'm like, bells going off. So that's something that I'm really, but it takes discipline, because it's so easy to pick up the phone and then lose yourself in, it starts with the notifications and it just kind of falls apart from there.
Yeah, I make sure that's why I do it after I've woken up, I've had my water, I've read my Bible, I've, done my thing. And then I'm like, okay, I can move into this and prepare myself, because even as you're scrolling things, you scroll through and you see like debates or big blowups in groups that you're in, and you get sucked in, but then you take on other people's issues and you see these things. Like you said, it could be triggering. And I don't think we realize how much media we're taking in and how it affects us. That and you need to filter all that out for yourself, or choose to do it when you can handle it.
That's a really great point. It is a choice.
Yeah.
And it is, I agree with you that it's a filter. I actually really like how you describe that. And there's many moments of joy. Sometimes it's messages from people that you want to hear from, but other times, I was watching a great artist. I'm going to draw a blank on her name, but a fabulous artist who wrote a song based on all the nasty comments in her YouTube channel, and it was a fabulous song. But I also remember listening to it and thinking, oh, she's still speaking out loud the negativity that was brought to her, and while it had humor, it was beautiful. At the same time, there's a reliving that she was going
Yeah.
through, and listening to that, and with irony, the people who were the hosts had literally, just as she was coming on, like right before she came on, had said, oh, and one of them said, no, I just don't have the comments turned on. I don't want my platform to be a space for people to have ugly debate and negativity, and so I just don't allow comments. And then here this woman comes on to share her craft of singing and songwriting, but the topic was so heavy.
Yeah.
And is that can be part of it, or there's the flip side to that you put all this emotional effort into a post, and there's no response to it at all, right? That's also jarring and disappointing, and leads to a whole bunch of train of thought that wasn't there when you woke up.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you talked about starting your mornings with a devotional. And one of the
Mhm.
things that I've done, I tend to do most of my journaling in the evening, but I know there's a lot of my clients who prefer to do their journaling first thing in the morning. It's that feeling of clearing their thoughts, of, I believe that, when we're sleeping, our brain, I think of it like a file, right? Like a filing cabinet. And it's taking all the experiences of the day and then making the connections between things that have happened
Mhm.
in the past, processing our natural filters that we have, our bias, whether conscious or unconscious. It's there, it's part of us being human. And so we process everything that day and then create, whether it's memories, things get discarded. And sometimes I find when I wake up, my ideas are so clear. I have so much clarity on something that I was working on, something I wanted to write about, an email. And even though I'm not necessarily opening up a device, I tend to use pen and paper, again, creating a boundary to being able to access email or other things. And I'll just draft out those quick thoughts. Sometimes, I've got ideas. I can be really visual. I can doodle. I can sketch. I can come back and circle things. I can use color. But I tend to, when I'm feeling super creative when I wake up, that I'll capture on paper. Do you find you have sort of a similar experience for you with your devotional, and do you write about it? If you don't mind me asking, do you write in that spot?
Yes, I do. So, and it depends on the topic. I mean, sometimes I journal about different things. So I kind of journal throughout the day. I definitely write about things in the morning because, like I said, it kind of sets my intention for the day. Usually it's on a theme topic, and you know, when it's something that I want to be working towards, having written that down and brought it to my mind helps me remember it and think about it throughout the day. But I also do, like you said, I wake up with ideas and I got to get them out. Otherwise, they're lost. So I do that. And then I do journal at other times, sort of to decompress what did happen throughout the day. But I like to start my joy journal and also my devotionals and journaling kind of thing in the morning. Um, if it's going to help me be set those positive intentions for the day. But if something's happened and it's not gonna, if it's gonna bring up memories and bring up triggers and then set me on a course, I save that for later in the day when I can decompress and handle that.
So interesting. So what I'm also hearing is that the things that you choose to write about is things that are positive, like whether it's creative or something positive that you want to capture. But if it's heavy, you will acknowledge that it exists and then park it.
Yeah, because I don't want to set the tone for my day first thing in the morning with like this heaviness. You know, I'll jot it down, I'll acknowledge it, but I want to save that for when I have the mental space to handle that, not starting first thing in the morning.
So interesting. I do something similar. I find during the weekends is
Mm.
when I'll have a very slow morning. I might do the I've woken up, I have my hug with my spouse, and then I'll stay where I am. Pull myself back under the covers. No, close the door. I'm gonna stay, right? And so I'll have a much slower morning. I will, enjoy my water. I'll have maybe I have a tea. I do a word search every day. That's something that I just really enjoy. It's again, it's on my phone, but I just have the one thing that I participate in, and I do it while I'm waiting for my tea to cool down. And so, this kind of slow start to the morning, that's me on a Saturday and a Sunday, whereas Monday to Friday, I am up, I'm out of the bed, I'm usually out the door within about, 10 minutes. And I will normally go for a walk if it's really pouring. You may see the handlebars right behind me, but if you're on video with us, but I might go for a ride, and bike ride. And so that for me is that that quick motion, and it's anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. And again, it's time for me to think through, let whatever thoughts I've had in the morning, those sit with me during that time.
I like the idea of movement in the morning. My ability to get out and go for a walk depends on if somebody's watching the kids. So we often do that as part of our morning routine as a family. So like I get up before my kids, but once they're up, we do have, like we've had the same rhythm, gosh, for like 10 years. So movement is usually part of our morning. And I like to use rhythm and routine rather than schedule, because I feel like that just makes you panic more. Like you got to stick to a certain time. Ours is more of a flow to the day.
All right, we're going to pin that. We're going to come back to that for
Yeah.
sure, because I want to unpack a little bit more about that, what that means. You talked about being barefoot and looking in your garden. That's probably a summer thing, but tell me a little bit more about that, because that sounds actually fabulous.
Oh, well, like I just wake up when I can. Yeah, like you said, just getting outside, listening to the animals, feeling the sun, just waking up and not having it always so like a just more natural, not always like in your house with bright blaring lights and then technology, like it's just so man-made. I just like to get outside into nature, listen, see how things are growing. And definitely I find that the feel of the actual earth on your feet, there is like if you look it up, there's actual benefits to that. It's legit. But for me, I just love the feeling on, and I will go out until it's frosty and then I put my shoes on. So yeah, we go barefoot around our house, like our property, until there's either like a million acorns or snow. But
Okay, I love that for so many reasons. And one of them is for me, that sensation that you're feeling. Now that's not everyone can handle that, because so
no.
often we're in socks and shoes. And I remember the first time I went barefoot and I was in a river and there was river rock. And I was so overwhelmed by the sensation that I got stuck. And I literally couldn't move, like I couldn't move. The coldness of the water, the feel of my feet on these rocks, and like one of my friends had to come and like take me by the arm. And I mean, we're talking like river, like it was barely ankle deep, but it was just too much sensation. And now, I also, it's so interesting because I was having this conversation with my coach. When we first started, and I'll get into my joint work, but when we first started doing footwork together, my big toe was quite separate from my tall, like second toe. There was quite a gap, and then another gap between the next two, and then these three were like literally like almost one on top of the other, because I had worn like pointy shoes, right? Pointy shoes, and so my brain also treated my foot as one large toe. Like if you said move your toes, they would like they would just move as one unit. Like there was no toes, there was like a toe. Like in the mental map that my brain had of my foot, is my foot was one unit with a thing that could move at the end. And so here we are, almost 2.5 years later, 2.25 years later, and I can move each of my toes, not necessarily independently one at a time, but I can certainly do like a wave. I can move my pinky toe. I can separate and lift my big toe separate from the others. The physical spacing, they're now like quite far apart. In fact, it no longer comes up into a point. It like fans out, like the physical shape. I wish I'd taken photos. I deeply regret not taking photos, because my foot shape has changed so much. And then on top of that, we have been at home. I have something called toe spreaders. These are my toe spreaders, and they're interesting. They're literally like little.
They look like those
gel.
things they put on you when you do your nails.
They does. Okay, yes, it's almost exactly, except that it's made of like a jelly
Yeah.
type of plastic instead of like the foam. And I spent a lot of time learning to wear, like now I put them on, it doesn't do anything, but at the beginning it would ache and ache and ache, and I could only wear them for like 5-10 minutes at a time. Eventually I learned to walk with them, right, walking with my toes spread, and it was a long time. And being home, being barefoot in the house made, I think made a huge difference. I know I can't fit into some of my shoes now.
I think for me, the reason it's been so easy is I've just been chasing after 3 mud loving boys for so long that I just jumped right in there with them. So I've got some pretty tough feet.
But you also talked about like there's value in that, right?
Yeah.
There's value in the calluses. There's value in
But you
being
also pick up the
exposed.
minerals from the ground. Like there's actual science behind it too. And just the sensation, the feeling,
The
it helps
bacteria.
me. Yeah.
So my sensation like that is my hands in the dirt. It's because I have vegetable gardens as well, and it's that sensation, the coolness just below the surface. It's not wet, it's moist but dry at the same time. That is, planting is hands down one of my favorite things. And just the sensation, like if I'm I have done times where I'll just go and I'll just play in the dirt, or like stick my hands in the dirt, and it's just such a calming sensation for me, which is interesting. Where like I love flipping my compost. I don't even know what that means, but it's like one of my favorite things about the fall is I turn over my compost in the spring and the fall, and I love it. I love that. My spouse is like, this is so, like, it's gross, it's decomposed, it's got a bit of smell, not terrible, but like it's earthy smell, and I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. The other thing about being outside, especially first thing, there's a lot of research in how we respond to sun, right? Because when you first wake up, one of the things that happens is your body, your cortisol goes up. You get this almost like a shot, if you will, of of this wake up shot. It includes a burst of glucose into your blood, all comes from your liver, and basically your body sort of activates and like sends out this charge, if you will, almost through the body of energy, to help you wake up and get going. And that can be overridden, that can be suppressed, because the sensation of it is certainly not the same as coffee, right? Coffee's like off the charts by comparison. But tuning back into that, another piece is your exposure to the sun is also another way of helping to maximize that. So that idea of getting out, moving, right, helping to circulate the blood, getting exposed to the sun with your skin, especially that early morning sun where it's not as strong as midday, where of course you may be risk of a sunburn. So I'm not recommending that, but that really does make a difference. And so I actually take my vitamin D supplements in the morning when I get back from my walk. And because we live in Canada, where you and I are, that's a really big deal, right? From July and August getting into September, there's sun, but from certainly October to May,
Yeah.
right? You definitely want to be talking to your doctor about supplementation of vitamin D, because our body can make it, but can only make it if we're exposed to the sun. And by exposed to the sun, that also means exposed to the sun. Like if you're fully caked in with sunscreen, like full long sleeves, which is healthy if you're out and you want to prevent getting burnt, but then you're also suppressing your exposure to the wonderful triggers for vitamin D. So that's another one. Those supplements can play a role first thing in the morning. Is that one that you do? Do you guys do like?
I forget.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those things, like I'll see someone post it and then we'll get onto that, and then when it runs out I forget. So definitely something we try to keep in mind. Even like any type of vitamins or probiotics, like all these different things, I've been trying to find more natural ways that I can just incorporate it without having to remember to put it on the grocery list and do that kind of thing.
It's a tough one. I use so I have medication I have to take,
Mhm.
and two different types of three different types of medication, two for my cholesterol, and then one at the moment for my iron. And so I use pill sorters. And that's how, because I also will struggle to remember, right? And so
Yeah.
that's been a huge one for me, is how do I make sure that I'm maintaining that day to day? And one of the only ways that I can do that is to have it like in front of me. Otherwise,
Yeah.
like I could probably like 3 or 4 days, I'd have no clue that I even missed it, let alone whether or not I like can tell you if I took it or not. So I found that to be really, really helpful.
Yeah, anything you can do to add to that routine of just, this is what I do, it's all set, it's ready to go, is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I found really helpful, and that idea of moving, especially before your first meal. So that's been had an impact on me. I've seen it have a huge impact on my clients who want to just shift their weight. And it's not about weight loss; it's about that feeling of being in a plateau, and I just don't want my weight to shift. And so that idea of tapping into sort of, I'll say, our DNA, the fact that you would have to move to get a meal, that actually has some powerful triggers as well, and not the emotional triggers, I mean internally. And so that's another one to consider when you first start moving. And so for me, it's walking. It's a huge one. If I'm not walking, as I said, if it's raining, then I might go for a bike ride. But the other piece I do is I actually have a 15-minute movement sequence that I do, and I do it every day. And I start with spine, neck, upper back, also called the thoracic spine. I get into my scapula, which are your shoulder blades, elbows, wrists. I'll move my hips, my knees, my ankles, my toes, right? We talked a little bit about how that's been a huge benefit for me in just moving through all the different spaces of the body and down through the limbs. And part of why I do it is, I can feel where maybe from a workout, or today actually it was funny, my calves were aching. I couldn't figure out why. Well, I'd incorporated some jogging, and I was like, oh, maybe that's where that came from. But I knew that they were tight because I did. It's almost like an assessment as much as it's a movement. So I could feel where things might be tight. I can feel if I was sleeping in an odd position, that sort of proverbial kink in the neck. I then also know where I'm going to need more movement through the day. And so I think of it as like my body like remapping my joints, like what is my safe range of motion, what's comfortable. And then the other one for me is, being on camera like this, is I know that I have like this weird head tilt thing. And so I can also I use that. So a visual for me is I watch for my posture. Am I coming, like curling up through the front? Am I up breathing well? Is my head doing like a weird thing? Do I need to move my headset to try and see if that's an issue? So all these little things about movement that impact me through the day, similar to you with your mindset, right? And your intention in the morning, I have a movement intention that I bring to the day as well. Just kind of different.
I love that. Well, on a good day, when I tend to do more movement when I guess it's a bit of an assessment. I can feel when I've been sitting too much.
Ooh,
I
what does
can
it feel like?
tell on those days when it's my lower back starts to hurt, and then sometimes I get like restless legs, and they're like, "Take me on a walk. I need to do something." So I tend to, in the morning, I don't want to just take off, and so I tend to do more stretches and things, sort of yoga like, just poses and stretches, and that just get some kind of, work it out a little. Um, do that when I can. And then I
It's also
intentionally make sure I go for a walk that day as well.
nice,
Bal-
nice. It makes a difference. I
Yeah.
really do believe it. I mean, it's one of the reasons why it's been part of our theme, right? Is movement.
Yeah.
The other one, meals. You said you have breakfast in the morning. So you're a morning breakfast person?
I do. I just make sure I have fuel for the day. I don't want to get going and then get all grumpy and realize, oh, it's, haven't eaten at all. I tend to do, I thought it was normal. So I guess it's not granola, but instead of milk, I eat it with applesauce and
Oh, cool.
dried fruit and stuff. So yeah, I have granola with applesauce a lot for breakfast, or whatever has been leftovers. I'm a big leftovers fan. I'll just eat anything that's convenient, but just make sure I have like, something in me to get going, because otherwise you lose focus and you start feeling drained and then you don't realize why. So I just make sure that it's part of my routine. Is you just wake up, you have something to eat, you have that water, and just make sure I fit that all in.
Oh, what I love about the applesauce with granola, which I have not heard of that combination, although you and I grew up with a friend who had apple juice in her cereal, which remember Fanula? That to me was just like,
Now see,
what?
I've discovered when I made my own muesli that's a thing, and it actually makes it taste so much better. So when I make my own, I make it with apple juice, so it is actually really good.
That's awesome. I love this. Well, and you're dairy free. We've talked about that on a previous
Yeah.
episode as well. And but also what you just described, that's high fiber food, right? That is going to move slowly. It's got some wonderful soft, like slow release energy that comes out of it as well. I had the opposite. I spent years struggling to figure out breakfast. Like no breakfast would really sit with me. Eggs didn't make me feel good. I would have a croissant and I'd be starving like half an hour later. I've tried toast, I've tried peanut butter, I've tried granola, I've tried like you name it. I've tried it for breakfast. My favorite thing for breakfast, hands down, and I rarely do it for obvious reasons, is pie, leftover pie. It's like my ultimate treat breakfast, especially if mom made the pie. But and so I don't do that hardly ever because I would eat all the pie. But when I discovered fasting for me, it was the first time that I found I almost had permission that it was okay not to eat breakfast, because breakfast of champions, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And I was struggling to find a breakfast that would make me feel well, and it actually came for me as a relief to almost have this permission to not have to eat in the morning and eat when I finally felt hungry, which usually for me is around 1 o'clock. And that was huge. That was absolutely huge. And yet I have clients who feel hangry if they don't eat. I have one who gets wicked headaches if she hasn't had protein first thing in the morning, in many different forms, right? Just protein in general. And so it's such an individual thing. I really have, that's the piece that I lean into more and more, is you can read whatever you want on the internet, and you can have conversations with whether it's a health coach or a nutritionist, and they'll have tons of fabulous ideas, but you've got to experiment and figure out what makes you feel well.
I like that you said it's sad but true to give yourself permission, but really it's listening to your body and knowing what's best, taking into consideration what other people are telling you, but what works for your own body best, and giving yourself permission to trust yourself on that.
Yes. And that experimentation piece, I think, is really important. You, at the very earlier on, you had said that you don't have a schedule. You have a routine. It's more of a flow that you've been doing. Like 10 years, you've been in a similar type of flow, and I really like that, because when in preparation for our conversation today, I was thinking about, okay, well, we're talking about routines, and routine is an interesting word because you can think of routine as being boring, right? It is a noun, it's an adjective, it's a verb, all the word routine, right? And so some of the formal definitions, it's a sequence of actions regularly followed. So a fixed program, thinking of a schedule. It might be something that you can feel as being kind of boring because it's repetitive. But then the flip side, I was thinking about it and the word regime popped into my mind. And a regime, on the flip side, it's a system or a planned way of doing things, but it's one that tends to be imposed upon you. And it really got me thinking, because routine is something that some of us lean very heavily into. It's a place of comfort, and it's it's an important distinction, I think, in relationships, because where one partner, it's their routine. For the other partner, it can feel like a regime because it's being imposed upon them. And then I was thinking, I bet you there's that same dynamic with a parent and a child.
So yeah, it really depends on how you approach it. And that's why that's sort of the difference, like in the wording, is when you have this routine or this schedule or this regime, and it's your mind is focused on the activities, doing it in order. I have to get these things done. Then you're not being relational. But when you focus on it more on like, this is our flow, this is our rhythm of the day, you're bringing them alongside, you're making that connection. It's now a connected activity that you're doing together and it's enjoyable. Then then it's more everyone's getting engaged and enjoying it better. But you can certainly turn and feel different if you're more focused on the task at hand rather than the person you're with. So it really depends on how you're approaching it, your mindset, your mood that day. If you're just, so yeah, it can go either way, even if it's the exact same tasks on a given day.
And it's funny, we've been talking about morning routines, but there's
Yeah.
bedtime routines, evening routines as well. And I, I think of bedtime routines. I think of when I was a kid, right? You have that total fear of missing out. I don't want to go to bed. I'm not ready. 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. I see you laughing. What is bedtime routine look like for you? And what are some of the tips that, okay, here, I'm just gonna stop talking.
Oh, our bedtime routine is just like so different. And it's one of those things I had to mentally give myself permission to be okay with it. My husband works some interesting hours, and so he works nights and he doesn't get home till late. But my kids want to see him because he's during the day when they're doing their thing, he's sleeping sometimes. Like, just it was a shift for me to say it's okay that my kids are up late because we're homeschooling, we can do what we want. We just shifted our schedule to match what worked for the whole family for a season, and then when he's on days we shift back, and it takes a little while. So I had to be okay with that. What I always tell parents, it's interesting. I often start off, and parents, especially working parents, are like, okay, what are your biggest stuck points? And often it's getting to daycare or school on time. And we're talking about the morning routine. I say, how is that going? And it always ends up this light bulb moment when they realize that your morning routine is actually affected most by the night before.
Yes.
Because getting somebody up, forcing them awake because they're dead tired because they didn't get to bed on time. So when you're actually looking at your day, your morning is most affected by your night. And you got to start way back the night before and work your way backwards to figure out where is our delays coming from and what can we do about it, and then think outside the box. But you want to make sure that you and your kids, if you have them, are getting enough sleep. So work backwards from when do I have to wake up? Let's count back. I mean, kids need more than adults. So you got to count back like 10 to 12 hours. That's when they should be getting asleep. Now we have to count back. Okay, when do I have to actually get them to bed? And that can actually shift your dinner. And depending on what you grew up with, what you are expecting as an adult versus what kids need, you may have to do some mentally rethinking. Okay, when is it okay for us to even do dinner? Do we have to have a big dinner? Because in many cultures, they have a big lunch and a small dinner, and they call it different things too. And so anything after they come home from school is really your whole evening should be, is this winding down the day? Is what we're doing going to encourage sleep down the road? Because if you're doing like a ton of activities afterwards, and then a big dinner, and then homework, and then they want to see you and they want a rough house, and then all of a sudden you're telling them to go to bed. I mean, none of that helped encourage sleep. It's fine to do those things, but you have to see, okay, what days and what times would be best for that? And is that most important right now for our family? And saying no can be big and scary, but it's actually really helpful. I was helping another family, and They realized that quick suppers for this short season that they were going through, simple, easy, light suppers might be best because they were trying to work on their mornings and getting everyone to bed at a reasonable time. Then we had to rethink dinners. So anything late afternoon, like after 4 o'clock onwards, you're trying to make sure you're slowly winding down the day. And that includes screens. That includes any like activities that you're doing. Even the lighting in your house, the music, the noise, like anything that you've got going on. Try to think, is this going to slowly tell my brain that it is time to go to sleep? Even the artificial lighting in our houses, like that's why you were saying sunlight, natural lighting, those natural lighting. I've got like these heavy curtains behind me that induces the sleep. My son could sleep until noon and he wouldn't even know what time of day it is out there, you know, which helps because we have shifted our schedule. I don't want them waking up tired. So yeah, all those things, evening routines they don't have to look like everybody else's, but you do want to encourage things that are going to encourage rest, relax, and eventually sleep.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack in there.
Sorry.
And I just, I'm actually going to channel my friend David and just say ditto. Like ditto, because everything you just said, like how does dinner play a role? What does the timing look like? What does the consistency look like?
Yeah.
Right. That's another one.
Yeah.
How does that impact your ability to sleep through the night, which then of course affects your energy levels and your focus the next day? And the other one that I have is, part of what I mentioned before, I went for a bit of a jog, which was huge. For those of you who may recall, I had a knee issue, and so this was like a really big deal. But part of it was because I had like this unbounded energy inside me, and I needed to get it out. And so I felt compelled to go for a bit of a jog. But it plays a huge role. I had slept really well, and so I had unbounded energy. And so there's also this mix, this balance where you could have really great sleeps, but then not a great sleep. But then you have to look at, what was my expenditure of energy during the day? Did I sit all day? Well, then maybe you didn't need to restore in the same way that evening, as opposed to being physically active all day. Then maybe you need deep restoration that night. And so all of these things are part of sort of an ebb and flow as well. And so we talk about consistency, but consistency actually means different things.
Yeah, you want to have consistency, especially if you have kids, because kids really do thrive on that rhythmic activity. It helps a lot with strong-willed children as well as kids with anxiety, because knowing what's coming next takes a lot of that guesswork out. They know the plan. And if you have a strong-willed child, then that this is our plan, this is our routine, this is what we do. There's less arguing points, right? So it helps with a lot of kids. Just, this is what our family does, this is what's coming next. And your brain just automatically, as soon as you know what's coming next, it triggers. We listened to the same CD, like bedtime CD. First, I can't, as soon as I hear one of those songs, I'm out, even as an adult, because I was rocking the baby to sleep to the same CD. Soon as it came on, they knew that that meant sleep. And it's just all these little triggers. So anything you're doing, it doesn't have to be music or whatever, but it really helps. And especially if you have that consistency, if you go on vacation, if you're going away, you can bring that bit of home with you, that consistency, that it still triggers the brain to know, this is my routine. This means I'm going to start heading to bed now. So that's another good reason to have that consistency.
I laugh because two things jumped to mind as soon as you said that. One of them was, you and I went on vacation. You might remember with mom, and I'm pretty sure I ended up in the room with the boys, sleeping on mattress on the floor. And sure enough, you're like, I'm so sorry about the music. So I know exactly what CD you're talking about, because it played on a continuous loop all night. And then the other one was when we were little, and there was a certain TV show that came on, and that simply meant bedtime. They didn't even have to say bedtime. And all I remember is the opening notes to this show called EastEnders.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I
then
thought
that
you were
was
going
it.
to say Doctor Who, because that one scared me. I would like run. We're up too late. It's on. It's
The other one, I've never
Yeah.
seen an episode, and
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's probably around 8 o'clock. And all we would hear is the opening
Yeah, I
music,
can imagine
and
it now as you're
and then
saying.
we would just get up and start walking up the staircase. Like no words were even need to be spoken for the most part, because there were at the beginning, but then eventually they got us into this routine, and it just meant like, no, this is not a show for you, and you're going to go to bed.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so true. And it's interesting because for me, the days when the next morning I have that grogginess is usually because I sometimes have that burst of creativity in the evening. So I tend to get a second wind around 7:30, and I could work until like 1 a.m. without any hesitation. And I don't. It's usually my spouse will be like, okay, you got to close it up. We're going to bed now. And it's because we wake up at the same time every morning. So regardless of what time I go to sleep, I'm going to wake up at the same time. And so that plays a role. But that burst of focus is because I'm on my screen. If I was not on my computer and I was doing it through pen and paper, then I know that doesn't happen necessarily in the same way. And certainly if I was going to stop and read, then that for me is a signal to start winding down. And so that's a huge part, is managing that evening routine. So we're recording this, it's now past dusk, right? It's gotten dark at night. I know you and I were talking about ring lights. So I've got like one here and one up, directly to my right and to my left. I've got a screen in front of me with some notes. I've got you right here. For those of you who've seen my eyes catching over, you're like right to my right. And so one of the things that I find is I'll probably have trouble winding down tonight, right? Because all of this artificial light, it's very bright. It does hurt your eyes. But then there's other things I've been able to incorporate. So all of my devices, with the lights excluded, the rest of my devices at sunset is where it's timed. It switches to that yellow light. And does it make a difference? I don't know, but I find that my eyes don't hurt to the same extent.
Yeah, that's something I definitely need to work on, is my evening routine. Like I've got my mornings pretty solid, but as an entrepreneur, I'm trying to sneak in work when I can
Yep.
around things. And
Yep.
I'm really bad about sneaking in work when I can. So I do tend to work late at night, and I have to be way more intentional about forcing myself off and creating that time. So it's not like, okay, I'm off now, I have to lay right down. I'm not. So I have to build, again, it's backtracking. Okay, this is this is my cutoff time. I got to get off the screens and have some downtime and get away from all these bright lights. Like my eyes were killing me even after sleeping. I woke up with sore eyes, and I could tell automatically I'd been on too many screens the night before. So it really does take a lot of being intentional, even for my kids too. They're up and doing their thing. And I have one who he's naturally, I mean, some people are morning people, some people are night people. I'm sure you've heard that. I'm a morning person. My husband and my middle son are night people. And he's getting older now. So I've had to work with him and say, okay, look, we have to come up with something we can agree on. You're going to have a nighttime alarm that's going to go off and tell you when to wind down, when to get off, so that, then you aren't just distracted. Oh, I was in the middle of a project and I forgot. There's no forgetting. Now we're going to set a bedtime alarm for you. To remind you to go to bed.
I, you laugh, but I had
Yeah.
that in there was a job that I used to have, and I had to set myself it's time to leave the office alarm, because there was so much work, and I just need to send this one thing. I just need to respond to this one
Yeah.
person. I'm just in the middle of, and I was always in the middle of, and there's no winding down. Work, the rest of the office left at 4:30, like 6 p.m. and I'm still trying to wind down. And so I actually had an alarm to remind me to leave work, right? Sounds ridiculous, but it's a real thing, having this um, sound, this note for yourself, essentially this mental reminder, audible reminder that you now need to change whatever it is that you're doing, and you have to set a boundary that's a thing you're going to abide by.
Yeah, I think that's really important, is setting boundaries between work and life and caring for your body, that you need to be intentional. You need to make those limits and those boundaries around it. And whatever it takes to set those, sometimes we say, oh, I will, I will. Willpower is fleeting, and setting those alarms really makes it more concrete, you know?
I'm going to leave it there because I feel like you and I just figured out what next topic we're going to have a conversation about. So, because boundaries is such an important one. So, Meaghan, thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation today. We covered a lot of things in this. It's a lot to unpack. And so I want to thank our listeners. Be sure to check out the show notes because we're going to put in some of those details and have some recap for you there. As always, please don't hesitate to reach out if you are looking for a specific topic, more information, you have a suggestion for an upcoming show. You can always look us up at morethangoodfood.ca. So Meaghan, thank you.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
It's always a lot of fun chatting with you, but I appreciate everyone coming in to join in on our conversation. And until next time, remember that living a healthy life is about more than good food.